All right. So today we are talking a little bit title. Hold on one second. I need to move my chat box and be on our way. All right. So today using SECD to prepare students for an evolving world and workforce. So I wanted this to kind of be like an interactive conversation. So there'll be some things that I want to share with you. I would love to hear some of your thoughts, and we'll just kind of make our way through in the time that we have. But I'm Patrick Fennell, have two organizations that I founded, one called Empowerment Solutions, which is focused on culture and climate in all areas, working with students, parents, teachers, counselors, and the community. Second organization that I founded called Empowerment Institute, which is a nonprofit that focuses on mentoring and on parent engagement. Everything that I do is based on what I would call an ABCD principle, where we want to be able to focus on our being accountable for our own attitudes, being able to make better choices, which then leads to the D, which is our destiny, the plan and the purpose for our lives. As Liz had mentioned, I'm also a trustee for SEL for NJ on that leadership team. Also work as an adjunct professor for the certificate program that is a partnership between College of St. Elizabeth and Rutgers. So I work with direct instruction for teachers and with counselors. And then also I'm a consultant on the School Culture and Climate Initiative, which is a 3-year initiative that focuses on helping to develop culture and climate within a school. And so there is that 3-year process. There's a school support network that allows schools to come together to interact and learn from each other. There's professional development and also a lab that helps us to understand the data so that we can make data-informed decisions. So all that being said, our agenda for today. First off, I want to start off with a rose by any other name, and that'll make a little bit more sense in a minute. Second, just kind of focusing on SECD through a developmental and career readiness lens, right? So we know a lot of times we focus on what happens in the culture and climate, but what does that look like when it comes to developing for career readiness? Wanted to just highlight the alignment of SECD with college, career, and life success. Then talk about really briefly how important it is for the adults in the room to model what it is that we want our students to be able to walk away and do. Last couple of things is that intersection between AI, technology, and SECD. We know that AI, there's a lot of different conversations, and that will continue to happen. And so I want us to be able to see how these things actually connect. And then finally, just some strategies to accomplish the goal, right? And so that's our conversation. So as we go, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, and I would love to continue to talk together as we go. So a rose by any other name, right? Now, anybody know where part of that comes from? Any English majors, right? That a rose by any other name, it's actually a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, which is, you got it, Kelly, it's Shakespeare, right? So Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Act 2, Scene 2. Caroline's got it as well. It was Juliet speaking to Romeo, and ultimately what she's saying is that just because Romeo is a Montague and she's a Capulet, it doesn't mean that then his name changes his character or how much she loves him, right? And so, in other words, what I want us to kind of take away from that is that the name of a person or an object doesn't change its intrinsic value, and that the essence of a thing is more important than how you label it. I wanted to start us off with that conversation because we know that in the United States that SEL has taken on kind of a negative connotation in some areas, while in others they recognize what it really means. And so we recognize that, you know, we call this by different things. And so SEL, social emotional learning, it's a process, right? So we're acquiring and applying knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Ultimately, I think we have often used SEL as an umbrella term. An umbrella term for a lot of different things. So some people focus on character education. Some people are calling it life skills. Other people are calling it communication skills. Some are focused on the responsible decision making and problem solving. Some are focused on career readiness and employability skills, which is some of the things we're talking about today. Some people, Castle has started to call it human skills, right? But I wanted to kind of broach the term that I have used in this particular presentation, which is SECD, right? So social emotional character development. So when we talk about SECD, Dr. Schwartz at character.org says that character gives SEL its why, right? That when we think about it, character, it's all those features that make an individual who they are as a person, right? The character of a person just defines who I am, right? And so those traits, those skills, those things that become important. When we talk about developing character, it's a holistic approach. It's a comprehensive approach to help students to understand themselves and the world around them, to be able to care about those things and to practice core values. Those core values really are just talking about what's important to me, but also we talk about shared values, which are what's important to all of us. When we think about that, it's important from a school perspective, but we also know in the business world, it becomes important to have those shared values as well, so that whatever it is that's important to us, it should show up in our actions, right? When we talk about character, our character development, that we have to be proactive and comprehensive. We don't want to wait until we get to a point where we're struggling or where there's a need, but we should be proactive and incorporate these conversations and holding to our values. This should be a part of who we are and what we do on a daily basis, whether it's at school or at work, and that we recognize that this culture of character, right, that is combined with social emotional learning is really about becoming our best selves. That's important wherever we happen to be, and that it becomes foundational in creating these attachments that become critical for us to be able to work well and collaborate together, but where we create that sense of belonging, but also connection to each other and to the goal, right? So when we talk about this idea of character, social emotional learning, character development, the CSED has kind of created some guidelines that talk about how we want to incorporate the two. And when we do that together, it increases academic achievement. We also recognize that these guidelines become a framework to foster the whole child and become a roadmap to aligning SEL practices and skills with the character strengths that a person has so that they can become fully their best. Right now, we also recognize that in order to develop any skill, we have to practice it, right? Nobody is able to just read something and then just do it instantaneously. So we have to practice it, we have to engage, and then we build on those SEL skills and character strengths. Now, if we think about SECD through a developmental and career readiness lens, like I said, a lot of times we think about it solely from purpose of developing culture and climate within a school, but it's also connected to the career world as well. So if we think about these skills that often are a part of SECD, just in the chat, I would love for you to share with me which SECD skills do you think are most critical to your students' current developmental stage? So if you're working with students, what are some of the most critical SECD skills that students need right now, as far as how you see it and what you're doing? I'll give you a few seconds to put that. So Stacey's talking about self-awareness and emotional regulation. Absolutely. Caroline says interpersonal skills, right? So how we connect and talk with each other. Kelly is mentioning self-regulation and coping, right? So that self-regulation, I have to be able to understand how I feel and then regulate myself. Communication, Bridget says. Kelly says self-management. Anna, self-regulation. Dr. Beth says collaboration skills, right? That it takes specific skills to work with each other. Caroline also says appropriate self-advocacy skills, right? I think those are critical as well. The ability to speak for myself, right? So all those things are fantastic. Second question then will be, which SECD skills are we assuming they already have? I think sometimes part of the challenge is that we assume that students should already have certain skills that they don't. So if we just take one quick minute to reflect, and I would love for you to share in the chat, what are some things that you may have assumed students have, but then in interacting with each other, you recognize that they don't necessarily, right? I'm sorry, Bill had earlier mentioned respect, responsibility, kindness, caring, curiosity, and integrity, right? All those things very critical. Dr. Beth says something that has been assumed that they have is self-awareness, right? Very good. What anything else that we want to add to that? Kelly says communication skills, right? We recognize that from the time that we had COVID and came back, we recognized that a lot of students don't always feel comfortable communicating with each other face to face, right? Stacy says that I no longer assume students have developed SECD skills, and I think that's exactly where we want to be. We don't want to walk in with assumptions about where they should be or what they already have, that we have to teach it from the very beginning. Kelly says integrity and accountability, right? I think that ownership piece, accountability, is definitely something that has become a challenge as well. And so last question then, if we recognize what's critical, we recognize that we don't want to assume what they already know, what skills do you think students are going to need in the future to be their best selves? So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts there, and then we'll continue with our conversation. What do you think that students are going to need as they make that transition, as they continue to grow and to learn? And so Dr. Beth says employability skills. Absolutely. How do we translate what happens in school to what they do full time in the rest of their lives? Kimberly says self-management. Stacy adds collaboration to self-management. Bill's social awareness and relationship skills. Absolutely. Caroline talks about self-awareness. Kelly talks about self-management and social awareness, right? Being aware of the people around me becomes critical if we're going to be effective in the work world. All right, and at school as well. So as we continue, we move forward. National Association of College and Employers came up with a list of some of the things that people are looking for when it comes to hiring someone. If you take a look at this list, what pops out to you as you look at this list of things that employers are looking at when they review a resume to bring someone in to interview? What is there anything that kind of pops out to you as you look at this list? Okay. Stacy says strong executive functioning skills, without a doubt, right? Bill says primarily SECD skills on this list, right? If you take a look at the top five, right? Problem solving, ability to work in a team, communication skills, initiative, strong work ethic, all those things come before the technical skills, right? And so everything, and Kelly says exactly that, right? Technical skills are not at the top of the skill list. And that ultimately, Dr. Beth is acknowledging that strategic planning is a part of it, right? And it is missing AI. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Kelly talks about initiative and problem solving. So all of the SECD skills that we typically talk about, they are at the top of the list. The technical skills are things that they will learn when they get there, but they don't necessarily have to have them as in order to be employed, right? Kelly talks about initiative and problem solving. Absolutely, right? I think that when I think back to it, my first supervisory position I had in my entire life was when I was 17 years old. I was working at KFC. I did everything they asked me to do. I could do everything from cook to go out and take care of things, work on the register, all that good stuff. We had a supervisor, a shift supervisor, that wasn't as consistent as he needed to be. And often when we got paid on a Friday, he may not show up on a Saturday. And so this actually happened several times. And I remember one Saturday, he didn't show up. My manager said to me, "All right, I want to talk to you before you leave. After the shift is over, I want to talk to you." And at first, I'm thinking, "All right, well, what did I do? So I'm replaying everything that happened all throughout my mind, all through the day." And then when I had this conversation, the person that my manager said to me, "This shift supervisor is not showing up. You do everything technically well. And so now I think that we're going to promote you to be a shift supervisor. Right. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, well, they're going to give me everything that I need to prepare me. But all that I really got was a name tag that said shift supervisor. And they said, all right, go out there and handle it. You can do it. Right. So what I started to learn really quickly is that the technical skills can only bring you so far, but it's the people skills that actually help you to be able to be your best. And so ultimately, we recognize that this is a part of what it is that a lot of organizations are looking for. They're looking for those skills that are connected with SECD. Right now, the alignment of SECD with college, career, and life success, there is definitely an intersection. We've kind of been talking around it, so I want to be a little bit more explicit with it, that when we look at career readiness standards, whether it's state standards, Common Core, other frameworks, there are specific skills that are necessary to be able to demonstrate mastery. So when we look at the social emotional learning side, we have those 5 domains: self-management, responsible decision-making, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills. All of those things become critical things for students to be able to not only know, but to practice, to implement in their everyday interactions. But we also recognize that we talked earlier about CSECD, that we also add the character elements to that. If we look to the left-hand side of that heart, there are 4 different character domains that I wanted to talk about relatively quickly. But character is not just a broad term, but character really, there are 4 different specific areas that define character, right? So those 4 dimensions, the first one would be moral character. Right. So those character strengths: honesty, integrity, compassion, gratitude, courage to take initiative. That moral character says that I am someone who is willing to stand up for what's right. Right now, when we think about the next area, which is performance character, right? Performance character talks about the character strengths that would talk about how well I perform. Everything from responsibility, accountability, goal setting, and grit, right? So my ability to give my best effort whenever it is that, whatever it is that I do, I'm always giving my best. And Dr. Beth, yes, this actually, the entire recording will be available after we wrap up today, right? So the character strengths of being able to be responsible, accountable, setting goals, having grit, perseverance, always giving my best effort. When we are able to do that, that's what helps to elevate our performance. The third dimension of character that we tend to focus on would be, okay, our intellectual character, right? So when we talk about intellectual character, it is being curious. It's about having intellectual autonomy and humility. It's about our open-mindedness. It's about critical thinking. These things all are important elements that talk about how we learn. The next one will be civic character, right? So talking about how we connect with each other. So being fair, being respectful, contributing to the common good. Ultimately, it's about being able to recognize that we have a sense of purpose together with each other, right? And so if you think about and look at moral, or at these 4 character dimensions, how do you see these things being important when it comes to the work world? And you can actually feel free to type in, or even if you want to unmute and share some things, we have a small enough group that we can kind of hear from each other. So how do you make that connection between the moral character, or I'm sorry, just the 4 character dimensions, and what's expected in the workplace? Specific thoughts about how those things connect? And if not, I understand that too. I think ultimately, when we look at these 4 specific areas, I think what we're really talking about is how we, Dr. Beth, thank you. So core foundational values and attributes, right? So being able to recognize that when we are in the workplace, or even when we're at a school or when we're in our community, that we have to have things that we all feel are important, and that we have to be able to be that person that's able to contribute to something larger than ourselves, right? And so we think about character, that is the other piece. And so when we talk about the alignment on the left-hand side, tend to be things that employers talk about: communication, teamwork, problem solving, adaptability, professionalism, initiative, and ethical judgment. On the right-hand side are how we tend to describe it from an SECD perspective, right? So relationship skills, relational skills, and social awareness, and making our way on down the line. As I said earlier, a rose is still a rose, right? And so I think it becomes important for us to connect terms and to be able to recognize that there are times in which we're actually talking about the same exact thing, but understanding how it fits into how we describe it so that we can be purposeful to make those connections more explicit. Right. Kelly in the chat says that I think that we have a disconnect on several of these, talking about moral or talking about character dimensions, right? So a disconnect on several with focus on performance and civic in most cases. And I believe that to be correct as well, right? Caroline says that these four areas really form a strong employee who will be valued and known to contribute to the workplace mission and climate in a positive way. Absolutely. Right. I think it is when you have strong character, that's what separates that particular person from others. So even if we have the same technical skills, the character of that person is what helps a person to grow in that organization, but also to grow as an individual. Right. Now, as we continue on, we had already talked about how, we had this college and career readiness standards that help to align these competencies, and we have to demonstrate it. But we also recognize that when we as schools say that we're teaching emotional regulation, employers call it professionalism. Right? When schools teach conflict resolution, employers call it teamwork. Right? When schools are teaching reflection, employers call it evaluation, right? That I want to evaluate what we did, how well we did it, how we can improve as we go forward so we can be more efficient and effective going forward. Academic standards tend to assess content, but performance really requires SECD. All right. And so if we put all that stuff together, I wanted to ask the question, what existing practices do we have already that already support SECD and career readiness? Right? There's certain things that I think we already have, but we may not have really thought about it in that particular way. So what existing things are we doing that are already supporting SECD and helping students prepare for their future? Give you a second to think about that. Like I said, you can feel free to put in the chat, or you can unmute and share your thoughts as well, whichever one works for you. Bill says collaborative learning and constructivism, right? So being able to work well and learn together, right? Caroline says running organizations like peer leader groups and student council. Fantastic, right? I think when we talk about peer leaders, student council, how we make decisions together for the best of the collective. Right. Kelly says on the job training and work experiences. Okay, fantastic. Collaboration on projects. Absolutely. Bill says service learning, without a doubt. And I think one of the most important areas of service learning is that debrief that happens at the end. What did we learn? How do we build on what it was that we took from this community service as well, right? So Kelly talks about community service, how I give to people for their betterment and not just for my own, right? How we learn from serving. Love it, right? So last thing that I wanted to just ask you really quickly, what SECD practices need to be embedded into the curriculum or further developed to support career readiness? Right? I agree with you, Dr. Beth. I think all these are good ones. So what practices do we feel like we need to embed or maybe further develop? Because I think sometimes we have the pieces there, but we don't always put them together and keep from duplicating efforts or probably ways that we can make it more effective or efficient. If we don't have any thoughts, I'm going to come back to that at the end. All right, so good. So Caroline says that interpersonal skills when working in groups, right? So we get people working in groups, but sometimes they don't always have the skills to be as effective as they could be, right? So maybe developing those interpersonal skills a little bit more. Bill says student ownership of their own education, goal setting, right? So setting smart goals for themselves. This is what I want to achieve for me, which connects to motivation. Kelly says reflection and evaluation, right? That reflection is a critical element of everything that we do. And if I don't take the time to think about it, learn what I did, build on my strengths, but then be focused on how do I build on those development areas, we really never get to our full best selves. Kimberly says, I think emotional regulation needs to be embedded more into all curriculums, not just teaching it in isolation. Completely agree with that, Kimberly. I think that it definitely becomes a matter of emotional regulation is something that I have to be able to do in every aspect of my life. And so if we can embed it into social studies, science, math, English, if we can embed it into everything, it becomes a part of what we do. And that's exactly where we want to be. Caroline says appropriate communication and verbal and written skills. I think both of those become important, particularly when we're used to texting and doing things like Snapchat, where we're using a lot of abbreviations and all of that good stuff. Being able to clearly express ourselves using full words and vocabulary, those things become important. And then Kelly says using a set of agreed upon norms. Fantastic, right? That it is about those shared values that become important. Bill says this is why core values need to be mutually developed and shared, adults too. And I completely agree with that as well. If we don't have that connection in what's important, our personal values then become bigger than our shared values, which makes it difficult to be able to collaborate effectively. Moving forward, I wanted to kind of transition just a brief conversation about the adult role in modeling SECD competencies. Dr. Beth, before I move into there, says, I think self-management needs to be implicitly and explicitly added in related to career readiness, employability skills, workplace expectations. That idea of managing my emotions, being able to one, be aware of them, but two, to be able to move beyond the feeling to purposeful action does have to be implicitly and explicit. I think we do well with the implicit, but I think that there's some space there that we have for growth when it comes to being more explicit to connect. Here's what we're learning. Here's when we use it. This is why it's relevant. And I think I'm probably going to come back to that a little bit later on as we wrap up. But the adult role in modeling. So we recognize that modeling becomes critical. If I expect for a student to do it, I need to do it as well. And so when we talk about the importance of modeling, we recognize that students learn SECD not just from instruction, but how they see us responding, communicating, and adapting to what goes on around us, right? We also know that adults are the most consistent curriculum in a school, right? That we can say, all right, we're going to turn to this page, we're going to do this, but they see us every single day. And what people see tends to be what they tend to follow. Our role, when we put it all together, we recognize that our role is to influence in a positive way. And influence happens on three levels, right? So that first level of influence is that I need to be able to model what it is that I want students to do. So it's about what people see, not just what I say, right? Kelly says that I heard once that adults are 50% of the curriculum in SEL. That probably is a good number. It might be even a little bit more than 50%. I would love to be able to actually measure it, but I know that it is definitely a major element of what it is that we do. So that first step is modeling the behavior that I want to see. But then it's not just enough to model it. The second level of influence is that I have to find a way to relate to the people that I'm working with or talking to or teaching, right? That relating is being able to understand how someone else feels, right? I may not have gone through what you've gone through, but I understand what it feels like to be angry or to be frustrated or be annoyed or whatever that happens to be, because when I can connect on the feeling, now I am more open to your influence because you understand me and what I'm going through. And so then ultimately, that last level of influence is the ability to teach. Well, I can't effectively teach until I model it. And then when I relate, then I can actually teach. And teaching is the ability to hear each other. And so it's not just what it is that I teach my students, but it's also my ability to learn from my students as well. It should be a two-way learning, which helps to influence and then helps us to be able to move forward, so that importance of modeling becomes foundational. Right. Dr. Best says, yes, I just did this with a school board and they loved it. It was surprised that they didn't already have it developed. And I think a lot of times we make assumptions about these things, but we don't focus on it personally. Right. So we talk about personal reflection. What I'd like you to do just for yourself, you don't even have to share this in the chat, but I want you just to think about for yourself, which SECD skills do students most often learn by watching you? Right. And so it's just something for you to think about, that you are teaching even when you're not talking. And so I want you just to kind of think about that. And I think it becomes a powerful reflection to recognize that my students are learning from me every single day based on my actions. Right. So that is the importance of modeling. Now, moving forward, I know we just have a few minutes left. So the intersection of AI, technology, and SECD. We recognize that we are living in a world where AI is a constant conversation, and it will continue to be, right? It has been projected that by 2030, 92 million jobs are going to be displaced, but 170 million new jobs are going to take their place. So I think the conversation that was happening for a long time was AI is going to replace all these people and all these jobs are going to be lost. Yeah, there will be jobs lost, but there are going to be new ones that are going to be created. Everything from AI and robotics management to virtual augmented reality, managers of AI, sustainability. So there are a lot of brand new jobs and certain things that we don't even know yet, right? That the projections say that by in that period of 2040 to 2050, we're going to be moving into what people are now calling the new collar era, right? So being able to combine technical skills with uniquely human strengths, that AI has a lot of capability, but there's certain human elements that are still necessary in order for people to be effective in this new economy that's coming. So when we think about it, which skills do you think would be more important in a world that is increasingly driven by AI? What are some of those human strengths that AI cannot replace? So I'll give you maybe a minute or so to think about that. What are some skills that become even more important as we are having to find ways to work with AI as a tool? And okay, so Stacy says self-awareness and self-management, right? So being able to be aware of myself and being able to manage myself, that is still a necessary skill when it comes to being able to work through this time of AI. Donna, great to have you on. It's been a long time. Donna says empathy, right? That AI cannot be empathetic. We have to be the ones to be empathetic. Dr. Beth says that human connection. We talk about collaboration and working together. We have to be able to connect with each other. Jasmine says the same thing, connection, right? Kimberly said that if you read a lot of science fiction or dystopian fiction, one thing might be civic character. There is no question about that. How we relate with one another becomes critical. Kelly says flexibility, problem solving, interpersonal relation, empathy, connections, etc. Kelly says self and social awareness. So we recognize that these skills that we've already determined as important become even more important in a world that's being increasingly driven by AI. When we think about it, technology can perform tasks, but it can't replace judgment, ethics, adaptability, and all the things that we've been talking about. Now, the Center for Curriculum Redesign has what they call their 4D framework. And so when we talk about AI, I think it becomes important to be able to teach how we use AI effectively, right? That everything that is connected with AI isn't bad, but it's about how do we use it in a way that is ethical, in a way that can help us, but we don't rely on it to do the things that we need to be able to do. So those four different areas, the first one is knowledge, right? But in a modernized way, where we're looking beyond traditional, right, to find ways to connect what's relevant in this new AI focused way of getting things done in the world. The second thing would be skills. And so those skills, things that we've already talked about just now, that also include creativity, critical thinking, communication and collaboration, where I can ask ChatGPT, I can ask Alexa or Siri or Gemini, I can ask anybody what you think, but I have to be able to critically think about the answers that I'm getting, and I have to be able to build upon that, right? I can get some information, but I still have to find ways to be creative and allow the information that I'm getting to inform me to make better decisions or to be even more creative as we move forward. The third area in that 4D framework is character. So we've been talking about a lot of that already. So curiosity, courage, resilience, ethics, all those things. How do I ethically use the information that I get? But also meta learning, learning how to learn. And I think that sometimes it becomes important to be able, if I stop just really quickly, for a lot of students right now, there is a question as to why do I need to learn this in the first place? Why do I need to go through all this when I can ask AI what they think, right? When I can do this or do that, why do I need to learn it when I can just get it at my fingertips? So it becomes important to teach students about purpose. What is it that they are focused on doing in their lives, their purpose? And when I am able to connect with that, then learning becomes how do I learn to be able to move into my purpose? What is my identity? What's important to me? How do I see myself? How do I support who I am to move forward? When we talk agency, how do I make decisions that help me to move forward in a positive way? And that motivation piece, I think ultimately we all know that intrinsic motivation is far more important and takes me a lot further than extrinsic motivation, right? And so when we talk about this 4D framework, it's about teaching students really how to learn, to be able to make knowledge more relevant, to have them to kind of take more ownership of it, developing those skills that become important, and developing the character of the person who's actually using it. And then finally, last piece that I wanted to get to and then kind of leave it open for any questions or comments that you may have is strategies, right? We've talked a lot about how this is and those intersections that are critical. There are certain strategies that we've actually already talked about, but I wanted to also kind of make it a little bit more explicit. But before we talk about the strategies, ultimately, what's the goal? Well, the goal is that we want to prepare students for life inside and outside of the classroom. And if that is the case, it means that we also want students to become lifelong learners. When I have that ability to constantly learn, it means that I'm constantly growing. And the last goal that I think we really have is to develop the ability to be adaptable and embrace change. We recognize that there is a lot of change coming down the pike. We know that there's a lot of things that are already happening and change is not going to stop. And so we have to be able to help students to prepare to be able to adapt, to embrace change, and truth be told, sometimes embrace uncertainty so that I can stay focused on where I want to go, what I want to be, and be able to get there. Right. So when we talk about strategies for success, some things that we've talked about, a couple things that we haven't, want to put it all together for us so we can kind of walk away with what are some things that I can really purposefully do to help make those connections between SECD and preparing our students for life outside of school. Right, so that first strategy, providing opportunities for students to practice, engage, and reflect on SEL skills, SECD skills, so SEL skills and character, right? So things like exit tickets, digital reflections, maybe group project reflections, right? So when we think about group project reflections, it simulates what happens when we collaborate at work. Certain things that we do together, then we go back and we evaluate what we did, what worked, what didn't work, how can we make this more effective? When we start to practice this from the very beginning, it helps students to be able to make that transition a lot more smoothly. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you for being here. Second strategy, collaborative learning with assigned roles. And so being able to assign roles like a facilitator, someone that's going to lead the group through, a person, a communicator who's going to share the ideas or talk about the ideas that students have already come up with, right? So when we look at these roles that I've listed here, we have certain things that if we flip those roles, give people different opportunities to play different roles in group projects, it helps students to understand different roles that are necessary when we collaborate and work together. Right. Another strategy for success is to teach the skill of providing and receiving feedback. There are a number of students that are either afraid of making mistakes or don't know how to receive feedback or don't know how to share it in a way that's positive, right? And so I've given you an example of specific, which would be tag, right? So tell somebody about something that you like. Ask a question, which gets people thinking about, I have to pay attention enough to actually ask a question that is relevant to what's going on, that makes me curious about what you're doing so I can learn something, and then give a suggestion. So when hearing all this, this is what I think. And so using that tag method is another way of being able to receive and provide feedback. Another strategy for success would be embedding SEC instruction into the curriculum. So a few things that I've added there, being proactive and comprehensive, connecting the academic objective with the SECD skill that is necessary in order to achieve it. Being able to build decision-making into the projects that we're working on. Couple others we had talked about earlier, just making the implicit explicit. I think that sometimes we just know in our minds that this connects with this, but I think we have to sometimes do a better job in speaking to it so that they know exactly what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, which makes it more relevant, right? So name the skill that we're practicing, make the expectations explicit, focus on not just the outcome, right, but focusing on developing the skill and creating opportunities to reflect. Last few will be develop and model the skills of reflection, feedback, and resilience. That when we talk about resilience, everything that we attempt to do does not always work the way that we thought that it might. So being able to work through things even when they're hard, even when they're difficult, even when I don't get the outcome that I expected, but continuing to work on it, right? I think being able to teach how to use AI as a tool to learn and not just the answer to the question. So being able to use it so that I can now take my curiosity, my creative thinking, all those things that we've talked about, and be able to build upon it and not just look to it to tell me what to do next or what the answer that I think that I need. Being able to coordinate scaffolding of those skills district-wide. We know that as students learn, their capabilities also grow. And so those skills kind of scaffold. And so I think sometimes being able to work from a district perspective, so when a student leaves third grade and moves into the next building in fourth grade, what are you doing there and how do we build upon what you're doing? So those transition times from middle school to high school, what do they already know? How do we build upon what they already know? I think it becomes important to coordinate district wide so that we have some seamless transitions and we continue that process in a way that becomes effective. And finally, developing partnerships with higher education and organizations. So being able to have those connections to build those relationships, hear from other people why these things are important and how they help you to get to where you want to be. All right. So if we just wrap it up, then our portrait of a graduate, we want to cultivate SECDs. We are looking to develop critical thinkers who are effective communicators, who are able to collaborate with each other, be adaptable in their learning, and be responsible citizens, and be able to problem solve effectively. So as I get ready to, I'm going to close this out. And so now I think we have maybe like 2 minutes left. So were there any thoughts, questions, comments, or anything that I can clarify for you as we get ready to wrap this up for today? And I truly have appreciated all of your thoughts, all your participation, anything that anybody has before we close it out. Oh, thank you, Kelly. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, Dr. Beth. Thank you both for all your contributions. So if as you all are putting some thoughts in the chat, I'm going to turn it back over to Liz and Bill. Thank you for your time and participation.
Wonderful, Patrick. That was so interesting and so relevant and timely. And so many of the messages resonated on so many different levels in terms of just how we model as adults. As adults, the skills that we need to continue to develop as the world changes. And then, of course, how do we set these kids up to succeed? Like, how do we make this, give them the tools they need? So I thought this was just marvelous and fascinating. And just thank you always. It's always you always do a wonderful job, and this topic is just so important. So thank you, Patrick.
My pleasure.
And so what we'll do, everyone, there's been a couple of questions in the chat. We will definitely be posting the recording of this webinar and the PowerPoint, I believe, on the SEL4NJ website. It might take us a day or two, but that will be available. And we really invite you all to continue to look at your list of SEL Week webinars. We have had 3 so far. We have 7 to go for the rest of the week. And if you can't attend, please know that the recordings will be posted. But as you've all just realized, there's nothing like being here in person with us all on Zoom, as opposed to just listening independently. So thank you all and have a wonderful day and hope to see you sometime during the next 3 days. And happy SEL week. Just as an aside, for those that you missed it, New Jersey has almost 600 schools who are celebrating SEL week this week formally. And we know many are doing it informally. So thank you all. And thank you, Patrick.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
And I'll just give another little plug. If any of you are doing SEL activities in your school and you'd like to share them with us, we'd love to hear about them. And if you send us a photo and a paragraph, we might even post it on our website.
And it is not too late to sign up for SEL Day at selday.org. It's wonderful to be able to show the world how important this is to all of us. Okay. Thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording.